Okay, so here we go. Part 3, Peter, you got some questions.
Part of the viewers need to know that part of the context of our meeting here is that last night Harrison did 3 hours of introduction to wave riding and open space with the Minnesota OD network, and so in the context of that, those remarks and those experiences and those questions, I developed some questions that I would like to ask you now. But before I ask those questions, I think you should get on tape here with what for you are the headlines about this strange thing called open space. Now, 25 years later, from the stumbling and fumbling that we did back in 83, 82, 83, 84, what are the essentials now of that approach to transformation?
Sure. One of the things that came very clear to me was that it was not something I invented, and very much more clearly is something that's been around for a long time, otherwise known as self-organization and systems. And I think what, to the extent I did was to stumble upon the initiating conditions for self-organization. And very simply, that goes, start with people who care about a given issue. Don't try and force them into it. Work from where they care. And when those people assemble, invite them to sit in a circle, create a bulletin board of their interests, and then open a marketplace so that they actually can quickly negotiate out the time and place of meeting and the actual combination of sessions. And then, as far as the facilitator is concerned, get out of the way. And the experience through, I have no idea what the real numbers is, but in excess of 100,000, probably as much as 300,000 iterations over 25 years in 136 countries around the world. What's happened is people did go to work.
Is that you doing it, or the people following
no.
doing that too?
At this juncture, I don't have a clue how many people
right.
are using open space.
So many
I know
are.
there's a listserv, and which any given time has 600, 700 people on it from around the world. I know for a fact that that's just a fraction of the total number of people who are using it. So I mean, no numbers were ever kept, but it is in fact a global phenomenon at this point. And every now and again somebody says, what's your hope for this? And my hope, very honestly, is that we stop, it just sort of disappears. Because it seems to me that open space at its best, and even at its worst, is kind of a training opportunity for living in a self-organizing world. And the moment it ceases to be a process that we do and becomes just simply an acceptance of the reality that we are, then I think, hey, listen, I'm out of here.
One thing you said in your introductory comments last night that was, I think, kind of almost stunned the group when you said it, and I'm not sure they really understood what you meant, that self-organization is everywhere, and it has always been everywhere. It isn't a, you kept using the 13.7 billion year metaphor, not a metaphor, it's a fact that systems have been self-organizing for the entire history of since the Big Bang. But to simply declare that everything is self-organization, could you say a little bit more about that? Kind of what? I mean, so the accounting department in my company or somebody's company is a self-organizing system. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of these conclusions that I came to only grudgingly. I mean, if only because it sounds so bizarre. But you know what? I came at it from several different points of view. Number one is just the simple fact that as near as I read the science coming out of the cosmologists and whatever, from the moment of the Big Bang to the present instance, the cosmos has evolved as a self-organizing system. That being the case, it seemed to me reasonable and logical that all parts of it, including Homo sapiens, should be included in that, and I could see no particular reason, regardless of what people might think, that human systems should be excluded from that. Maybe they could, but to me, the phenomenon of self-organization is roughly the same as gravity. It's there. And yes, you know, it's a theoretical possibility that you could absent yourself from gravity, but on planet Earth, not a great likelihood. So that was one thing. The second thing was that when I started to think about the really high moments of human experience, and I have to give you credit with the principles of behavioral characteristics, which is kind of where I first started seeing these things. And I also saw those precisely same things in every really hot open space. I mean, if you had said, okay, these are the behavioral characteristics of open space, I would have said, right. And since it seemed to me that the motive power of open space was in fact the phenomenon of self-organization, what drew me to it was everywhere I see truly high performance, what I've got is self-organization at work. And the issue is how well and how fully is that self-organizing process working. Now where it's impeded and there's severe system constraints, it doesn't do very well. Occasionally it'll die. I mean, that's what happens. But generally speaking, it's all over and it does a pretty good job. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, where do you stop once you started down that road? And my immediate answer was, I couldn't think of a good place to stop. Maybe an accounting system. But, you know you know that in an institution there is an accounting system and so forth and so on. You're supposed to play by the rules. And both you and I, as good bureaucrats, or you as the dean, we knew how to get around it. What were we doing? We were appealing typically to the informal
We were
system.
self-organizing.
We were self-organizing. And so here's this very beautiful abstract system, which the moment it got dumped into reality and faced the dean, otherwise known as Peter Vail, guess what? It became like all the rest of creation, self-organizing, etc.
So my question is this: Peter Kostenbaum and Peter Block talk about free will and freedom and accountability. How does that fit in?
I see self-organization as the context in which all of that occurs, and doesn't preclude free will or accountability. As a matter of fact, if anything, it makes both more important. Just as gravity does not preclude free will or accountability, but you have to, it changes the way you operate. If you actually think you're in charge and you control the system, you behave in one way. If that's not true, and what you're actually learning to do is, in the terms of my book, go with the flow, ride the waves. There's wave riding with integrity, and there's wave riding that doesn't have integrity. So I don't think that changes at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who suddenly they hear self-organization and they think that somehow or another that obviates any necessity for moral responsibility or anything else. That's dead wrong.
Mm-hmm. Now, actually, as we were talking, you're talking about what we know good bureaucrats do about how they game the system and so forth. I remember as a professor at George Washington University in the District of Columbia, I had a lot of government employees in my classes, MBA and doctoral classes. And one time, some guy who worked for the Fed, he was in the part of the Fed that determines the nation's money supply. And I think it's every month, the Fed publishes a number called M1, which is an absolute bedrock principle for economists all over the world to extrapolate then with their theories about what's going to happen with inflation and what we ought to be doing with interest rates and all that stuff. M1 is absolutely a core. So this student sitting in my class says, you know, the whole rest of the world thinks M1 is a very complex, derived mathematical entity built on piles and piles of data, enormous amounts of number crunching, and he said, yeah, the truth is that there is an awful lot of rational thought that goes into M1, but when it comes right down to it, we are throwing darts at a board, and we know that when we publish M1, then all kinds of important things will happen and important decisions will be made, but M1 is a political expression. It is not a rational expression. It's a political expression. And I remember how kind of shocked the class was and stuff. But I've known from many years of working with accounting and finance people and so forth that a lot of their numbers are political expressions also. And in other words, where I'm going with this, Harrison, is that the question I had sitting in the room last night, that they too are self-organizing.
Yeah.
They too, in their minds, are acting responsibly.
Absolutely.
They too are acting according to what they consider to be the sound professional principles. What happens then is you get collisions of self-organizational systems. The small appliance division goes off with Harrison Owen in the woods and has an open space conference and comes back with a lot of exciting ideas about where to go with small appliances. And the accounting department says, you don't have budget for that. And they get billed as then the bad guys who somehow spike the beautiful creative flower of the open space process. These big bad accounting people come in and spike it. But that's an expression of their self-organized systems. You get, the vision I was having last night, I wasn't going to hit you with this in front of the group, but you know, cosmologists know that the Milky Way is a self-organizing system, and Andromeda is a self-organizing galaxy, and they're on a collision course, and in 2 billion years they're going to collide. What's going to happen is that the self-organized principles of each galaxy are going to be shredded. A new self-organized entity will emerge, but only after much Sturm und Drang will it happen.
Right.
So one of the things we're seeing, this leads me to a vision of life in organizations is a life of collisions of self-organizational systems. And what we really need is an open space conference about that. How are we going to manage the collisions, the integrations and lacks of integrations of all of the different self-organizing subparts that are going on around here? If I was the CEO of General Motors, I would be asking, I think I should be asking that question.
No, I think that's a valid question.
Because what companies like GM have allowed to happen instead is self-contained stovepipes that are maneuvering viciously with each other in political infighting, but they're being allowed to evolve on their own terms and go off and do their own thing. That's how you get a Hummer division.
If you want to put it in classic terms, you know, something happens, conflict or whatever, and classic terms are the system either goes poof or it rises, reorganizes new and higher level of complexity, transforms. Okay, so the options are, two central skills are, one, how do you have a good funeral? Because there will be things that don't make it, just happen. The other skill is, how do you open sufficient space so that there is the room for reintegration at a higher level? I mean, one of the things I've learned with open space in high conflict areas, the Middle East, for example, typical peacemaking process is when the guys aren't behaving, they're shooting each other, put them all in a room and clamp them down. Negotiate out the fine details. All that does is raise the level of conflict. What I discovered, and everybody who's worked with me in the Middle East, is when you get a situation like that, open the space. Doesn't mean no boundaries. It means a safe container within which the conflicted elements all can participate and engage. And one of the things I learned is nobody really wants to do in somebody else, just as, to do. When they run out of options, they'll do that.
They think they have to, but they don't want to.
But they don't want to. So the art, and space is not just physical space, it's also mental space and cyberspace and whatever.
Temporal space.
Temporal space. The art is to give sufficient room, but still bounded, but permeable boundaries and flexible boundaries, so that the conflicted parties can. Now, for your small appliance people who went off in the woods and did an open space and came back and then just ran into the accounting department, the mistake was theirs. The small appliance people.
Yes.
They should have
I know.
invited the accounting people to the open space.
Or created a new one. Realized that now we need an open space that
Or do it-
bridges us to
exactly.
that.
And
And that
the
has
nice-
happened by,
Oh, yeah.
some OD people have done that, have deliberately reached out to intrigue some of the more staid parts of the organization
Exactly.
and gotten some believers over in industrial engineering or over in accounting or something. And I was telling Tom Dick before we started that one of my very first experiences with industrial engineering was a group of creative industrial engineers who were transforming the IE division of Kodak Park, Eastman Kodak, reaching out to line managements in ways that they had never done before. So
open, to the extent there is an answer, my experience is...
of course, it's
that
not an
if
answer,
you-
it's a strategy. Yeah.
Well, it's a strategy, and so far it's worked. That the typical response to the appearance of conflict is to grab the suckers and tell them to shut up and be good. Wrong. What needs to happen is to recognize that there's serious pain here. So you're going to have to open it up, and the parties will find the way. You will never get that complexity. In the Middle East, for example, there isn't a single person who could begin to understand the complexity of that situation. On the other hand, given the space and the opportunity to seriously engage each other, the parties will figure it out. Now, their idea of peace and our idea of peace may be very different. One of the things I've noticed is it's been that way in the Middle East since at least 2000 BC.
Yeah.
So we're going on to 4,000 years. And there's a reason. The Middle East is the sluice gates of humanity. You're either coming or going. And anytime you get near a sluice gate, you get permanent white water. And that's turbulence. And that just comes with the territory.
So, Peter, have you got any other questions or reactions from last night that you would like to bring up?
Well, as I did bring up in the group last night, again, I guess I'll go back to what I said earlier here, and that is that I don't want to lose sight of the amount of courage and creative leadership that is needed to conduct these open space, to help a group of people find the energy that is latent and invisible among them, because they don't know it's there. They often don't know it's there themselves. They surprise themselves with their own creativity. I did have the thought that, and I'm sure you will agree with this and probably have some deeper thoughts about it than I do, Harrison, that as time goes on into the 21st century, the open space philosophy and its various spin-offs and so forth is going to become even more and more important. And the way I picked it up in my mind was that the more diverse an organization is, the more it needs open space, because you cannot use top-down control solutions. When you don't understand all of the different cultures and subcultures and perspectives and needs and values and attitudes and assumptions, when you sitting on the top don't understand all of that diversity, you can't write policies that and try to apply them to everybody on hours of work or modes of dress or forms of diet or reporting relationships or You can't program any of that from the top down. And so we all celebrate diversity, but
We
it's
just
gonna,
don't want it in our house.
it's going to take open space and its companion philosophies to allow creative problem finding and problem solving among. If you don't do that, you're going to have a whole lot of very resentful employees who are going to apply the law of 2 feet and they're going to walk.
One final thing from my point of view, open space is typically talked about as something new, strange, and different. And I just really I flatly say, it's all open space. I mean, it's all self-organizing. Some of us do it better than others, and some of us do it more intentionally than others. And it's even recognized in the management literature, usually in a footnote, if at all, but it's called the informal organization. And it's alive and well ever since. And one of my favorite quotes from one of the large tomes on management, I forget the guy's name who wrote it, he said, the informal organization is the system that workers use to get their job done. Now that's the only thing he says about it, which I found remarkable. Here's the thing that they use to get their job done. We all do.
Right.
It's the way we do things around here. And you know who invented or who discovered the informal organization?
Who was it?
These Harvard guys and the Hawthorne experiments. So you look, chapter 24 of the big book, Management and the Worker, the industrial organization as a social system. There's the formal organization and there's the informal. And that discovery, it wasn't an invention, it was a discovery, because informal systems have been there since the dawn of man. But it came like a thunderclap, because basically it said to management, you don't have control.
Right.
There's all these things going on in your organization and you don't even see.
And furthermore, that's the way stuff really
That's the way
gets done.
things get done, yeah.
No,
So
really
don't squash it, but now, here we are, 50, 75 years later, and managements are still trying to squash the evidences of the informal system.
Right, that's the job of management, right?
It's
So
just-
if it really is true that the informal system, that it's all self-organizing, the informal system is the way we get stuff done. The job of management is to kill the one thing that enables the organization to survive. With that, I rest my case.
I am going to my professional grave, which is, say, retiring, with this conundrum, that we've been at this for all these years, and we still are producing millions of men and women who think their job is to control everything and to stamp out these evidences of self-organization, of creativity, spontaneous innovations, and so forth. I just don't get it. Why? I mean, put on my organizational behavior professor hat, I suppose I could spin a theory about it, but it just, to me, is so surprising when I find some man or woman who thinks they're in charge and their job is to make sure things go the way they want them to go. I just don't get it, but that's me.